Hello, Devlin Bishop here with you, and welcome to Devlin's Mondo Nostalgia radio show. Almost forgot the title there. I rebranded this recently, but I got to remember the name of the title show. I hope you're doing well today. Thank you for pressing play. I've got a lot of great subjects to talk about. Some I'm looking forward to talking about, some not so much, but I just felt I had to talk about them anyway. So thank you for making us part of your day. You don't know how much it means to me for you just to do that simple task of pressing play. And whether you listen to us, you're just sitting there listening to your computer or listening to the downloadable podcast on iTunes or Google Play, or whether you're just like putting us in the background while you're doing some chores that you needed to get to. Doesn't matter. I'm just happy to have my voice running where you can hear it. Anyhow, lots going on in the world of entertainment today and this week. And this happened last week, and I didn't get around to touching upon it. I don't tend to touch on bigger topics too much, but this is one that's near and dear to my heart. And I'm glad I'm getting it out of the way, because all the other stuff I'm going to talk about is positive, but unfortunately this isn't. And it's the Roseanne situation, which has kind of saddened me. It really hurts my heart a lot. Not because I'm a huge Roseanne fan. I actually think she's very talented. I think she's funny. I love the original show, and I even seen some of the reboot and thought it was actually good. I was worried that because of how the show went, I didn't know how well it would do. But it was actually, I've seen a couple of episodes of the new reboot and thought it was good. It has nothing to do with any of that. It's just Roseanne, even back in the day, the series, she was a really big stand-up comic through the 80s, and when 1988 came, she debuted her show, Roseanne, and, compared to other shows with more affluent families like Family Ties, Cosby Show, stuff like that, Roseanne came and showed us a more blue-class collar workers and, dealing with them having how to pay the rent, having issues raising their children. And it really opened up sitcoms to show more realistic lives. Cosby was getting huge ratings too, but I think more people could relate to the Roseanne sitcom. It's sad that both of these sitcoms now are in flux because of things their star has done. Now, I'll be honest with you. I was very disappointed in Roseanne and what she said, and I think ABC made the right decision. And for those of you who don't know what's going on, and you're lucky because it just was saddened me when I heard it. As you know, the original Roseanne show ran for 9 seasons, and it was always a solid hit getter. And then they tampered with the formula a bit at the final year, and it eventually got canceled. I can't remember if it actually got canceled or if Roseanne pulled the plug on it, but I know the last season is very different from all the other seasons, but we'll talk about that a little later. So anyhow, the show was a big success, and then, after the success of Will and Grace's reboot, where they brought it back from the dead, they decided to try a couple other shows, and Roseanne was one of them. Now, a lot of people wondered how they were going to do it. This is a spoiler, so if you're kind of watching the repeats of Roseanne right now, though you'll probably have to buy them on DVD, because I hear even the repeats are being pulled on a lot of the syndicated shows like CMT and some other stations that were airing them. But if you haven't watched it, a little bit of a spoiler here. The final episode was pretty, basically, it's hard to explain, but the last year they decided to try something different. Roseanne was kind of getting bored with the blue collar stuff. They won the lottery, and basically the show changed. Like, they were going off spending time at hotels and vacations, and even I remember a dumb spy story where I don't know if this is true or not, but I almost seem to think of Roseanne running on top of a train. I apologize if that's wrong, but it was just horrible. I watched that whole season, and it was just hard to swallow. But at the end, she kind of found a way to erase that whole year. And she had always been in the series that her character wanted to be a writer. So she used it as stories she was writing. So they really didn't lose the lottery. The year before, the cliffhanger, Dan, played by John Goodman, his character had a heart attack, and she claimed in the series finale that he actually died from that heart attack, and then her life had been turned in turmoil, so she wrote these crazy adventures in order to do. I thought the finale wasn't bad. It was kind of brave, but she basically changed all the characters. She said that the daughters were married to the opposite sons. She said that, Jackie came out as a lesbian. Like it was so final. But basically what they did when they did the reboot was that they decided to pull a Will and Grace, because Will and Grace also had a series finale which showed all their lives changing. But when they did the reboot, they kind of pushed that aside and said, no, that didn't happen. And that's exactly what Roseanne did. So the couple of episodes I saw in the new reboot were actually back to her being blue collar and dealing with medical issues, dealing with grandchildren. And it was actually cool because it actually felt like the old Roseanne again. So anyhow, ABC had a major success. The reboot was huge. It was back on top, and they wasted no time to renew it for a second season, and everybody was happy. I know a lot of Roseanne fans who were so excited to see the old Roseanne back, and it was nice to see her now in an older age and now dealing with more grandmotherly type things, which was quite nice. But then Roseanne said some horrible things. Now, I'm not going to repeat what she said, but the lady she said them about was one of Obama's former representationers, I can't say the word, Valerie Jarrett, and she just made some really bad racial slurs, comparing her to an ape. Now, this isn't the first time that Roseanne has ever been in hot water. In fact, Roseanne tends to get in hot water quite a lot. But we now live in a different time. So when she said things in the past, we've kind of either laughed it off or thought, what an ignorant person, and she just kept on going. But we live in a different time now where we don't tolerate that stuff. And within hours of ABC hearing about this, they've decided to cancel the second season of the new show, which have left fans kind of scrambling and mixed. Some are, understand why ABC did it. Absolutely. You just don't get away with stuff like that anymore. And they didn't hesitate. And I totally get that, And then other people were saying, well, you know what? Donald Trump says worse stuff and nothing happens to him. Why does she say something even though she's come out and apologized for it? And basically, she feels bad about it, and then they still cancel her. Well, I get both sides of it, I understand there is something as free speech, but I also know that you should be old enough to know that you don't say stuff like that, especially on social media. You shouldn't be saying that, out in public in general, but to put it out on social media and then, she does have a right to free speech. And if that's her feelings, that's fine. But ABC also has the right to make their decision. And they probably have a code of conduct clause, and they don't want to necessarily be linked to someone who, this isn't the first time she's made remarks like this. She made remarks like this all through the Obama campaign, commenting about him, being connected with, bad situations and the fact racially, questionable statements she'd say. I'm trying to take the high road on this, even though I am very saddened by all this. But at the same time, I get why ABC gets the right to make this decision. And, it wasn't just ABC. A lot of her co-stars made sure they went on social media to say that they were saddened that Roseanne made these things and how it's going to affect so many people. Not only the people that work on the show, the people, the cast, the crew, but also the fans that actually loved seeing her come back. The ratings for the new Roseanne show were absolutely huge. You know, ABC didn't even question bringing it back, and they probably would have brought it back for more episodes than I think they did 10 episodes or something like that. But the truth of the matter is one person has now put her foot in her mouth, and again, this is not the first time she's done it. And what has happened is now she's hurt so many people. Not only the cast and crew that relied on those jobs, you know. Yes, Roseanne has always been able to find work. John Goodman is an incredible actor. I was actually surprised he came back to the project because he's done so much work in movies now that he's made such a name from. Even Laurie Metcalf, who plays her sister, she just got an Oscar nomination just a couple of months ago for her work I forgot the name of the movie, but she just got nominated for an incredible movie that I fail to remember right now. But she's become a critically acclaimed actor. So when Roseanne said we're redoing the show, I was actually surprised that both came back for it. But you can tell that's the love they had for it. Sarah Gilbert is a producer on The View. She's on The View. You know, she came back for it, even though it meant, you know, like she had to stay away from her family more. Other actors haven't been so lucky on that show, and, you know, they've come back and, you know, hoping to get a new lease on life. Michael Fishman, who plays DJ, one of my favorite characters because he was always just kind of the little kid that always get into trouble. He wasn't always featured a lot, but I thought he was good. He actually said that he was saddened too. But, you know, a lot of people could have said that, well, he's saddened because he's missing a paycheck. But he was quite eloquent with how he stated the fact that, you know, the one person on this show doesn't speak for the whole crew, but he's actually saddened about the cast and the crew that are losing their jobs for this. And the fans who gave them those big ratings because they were so desperate to see the Connor family back and see what their latest trials and tribulations were. So yes, I do hope that Roseanne does get help. She has been apologizing. She's been on interview shows crying. She's doing everything she can because I think she realizes she's messed up. She's gotten away with this in the past, but she's forgotten that we live in a different world and we don't tolerate stuff like that anymore. And, you're allowed to have your views. But when you're comparing people to monkeys or calling them, Muslim supporters or something like that, that's going way past just your beliefs. There are nicer ways to deal with stuff, and in most cases, just do what Thumper's mother always says. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Anyhow, so I am sad. As I said, I didn't watch the Roseanne reboot, but I did get to see a couple episodes before it got pulled. And, I loved that so many people were happy to welcome the Connors back in their home. And the fact that just one little social media tweet and all these people are out of work, all these fans are without their family that they wanted to be part of again, and it just leaves me sad. So anyhow, I totally understand it. I do hope Roseanne gets some help. I'm really sad that there won't be a second season of this show, but I wish all the people involved the best of finding new work or doing stuff. And you know what? I will still watch old repeats of Roseanne. Just like, I might not like everything Cosby has done, but I still will pop on a Cosby episode, from the first couple seasons. I might close all the windows and doors so nobody hears me. But I personally think that we don't have to give up on what they have created. We don't have to promote what they're doing, but we don't have to throw away the stuff they gave us. So I might absolutely abhor the stuff Cosby's done, and I'm glad he's paying for what he's done. But that doesn't mean I should feel guilty if I still want to listen to an old Cosby comedy album, or if I want to watch an old episode of The Cosby Show or Fat Albert even. And the same goes with Roseanne. I do not like what she did. I do not think I totally support ABC for why they don't want to back her anymore. But I might still put on an old Roseanne episode because some of those early episodes are absolutely hilarious. And she is one of the things that makes it. So I'm the kind of person who likes to separate their talents and what they've given us with the people they are. Because if you go through history and see some of the artists or even like composers, they had questionable lives, but we still enjoy their stuff. Now, I'm not comparing, symphonies and stuff to these sitcoms, but sorry, shows like Cosby Show and Roseanne definitely are game changers in sitcom thing, and they are still very funny and endearing. Anyhow, I'm done talking with that. As I said, all the other stuff I'm going to talk about is more fun. Even the next topic, which may come off as sounding a little negative, but it's just my opinions, and that's what I give. As I said, I used to love the old Roseanne show. Like every show, sometimes a show feels fatigued, but sometimes they just go out. And in other times, they make huge changes to their lineup, and they totally screw up the things. In Roseanne's case, as I said, in year 9, they decided to win the lottery and change the whole format, where the humor still had its moments, but the storylines just got over the top and crazy. And it's a show I actually considered that it overstayed its welcome. I'm not talking about shows that run a long time, like The Simpsons or a Dallas or a Family Guy or South Park. That basically they run a long time, but they really don't change their formula too much. So it just comes down to if you think they're still funny or not, or if they're still doing their job. Some shows have ran way too long. But then there's shows that actually changed the story so much that I think that they should have been canceled a while ago. So I'm going to look at some shows. Most of these are off the air now. And there's one that's still definitely on the air that I think overstayed their welcome. But again, it's not because of how long they were on. It's because the format blatantly changed from the original thing. And Roseanne fits in this. Because for 8 seasons, we got the blue class working. And then we basically got a lot of garbage after that. And it was nice to see the reboot kind of remembering, yeah, we admit 9 was bad. So here are some other shows that ran way past overstayed their welcome. That's what I'm going to call it. TV shows that I believe overstayed their welcome. We're going to start with a show that a lot of you people love, and you might actually boo me a little bit because I think it overstayed its welcome. Beverly Hills 90210. This is a show to me that was actually a really great show. It was the first real successful hour-long teen drama, even though, saying teen to Beverly Hills 90210 is kind of crazy because a lot of those actors were not only in their 20s, some were in their 30s. But you know what? It was a great show, and it was funny, and people tuned in to see the lives of Brenda and Brandon and Dylan and Kelly and Donna and Dylan and David, I don't know who I've said already, and Steve. Can't forget Steve. And anyhow, just mentioning those names for some of you are probably giving you warm feelings in your heart. But for me, the show did overstay its welcome. The reason why is because of how the show went. Now, most soap operas I forgive. Melrose Place, Dallas, Dynasty, they all stayed probably much longer than they should have, but it was a soap opera. Beverly Hills was a soap opera eventually, but the reason I say it stayed over its welcome is because the show was basically about fish out of water. Brandon and Brenda Walsh moved to Beverly Hills, from Minnesota, and we see how their lives differ when they deal in this glamorous new life. Now, it was bad enough when Shannon Doherty left the show, but Brandon was still there. But there was a time that Jason Priestley left the show, and at that point, It's just Beverly Hills 90210. We're dealing with characters we know and love. And I just feel that that show was supposed to be Brandon and Brenda and seeing them. And when both were off the canvas, I just thought there was no need for this show anymore. Now, I'll have to give it to them. I was a big Brenda fan, but when she left, they actually still had good stories when they brought Tiffany Amber Thiessen in to play a friend of the family from Minnesota. She was a great bad girl to the show, and it was really good. I even think the show got better when Brenda left because the Dylan story arc, how they wrote Luke Perry off the show, I think is one of the best writing off of a character they ever had. I won't go into it, but it involved gangsters and a girl he loved. And yeah, I'm sure some of you are having some real memories because it was so well done. And you know what? As far as other soaps go with teens, Beverly Hills is still the best. But eventually, when Brandon left, they kind of lost a lot. Before Brandon left, I actually walked away from the show. It was when Luke Perry returned. After writing him off so wonderfully, he came back and was just almost like a different character. He really didn't seem to care for anybody, and he was a bit of a badass. So as soon as Jason Priestley said, "I'm out of here," I stopped watching the show. I probably picked up the final seasons in syndication, but I still think this show should have ended when Brandon was the next one to walk out that door. And a lot of these you're going to see are shows that basically changed up their forecast. Happy Days is up next. Now, Happy Days is the show that coined the phrase jump the shark. And they did jump the shark many times. But this show has transcended through the years. It started off, the first year of Happy Days was almost filmed like a movie. It's a very different looking film, and it feels like it's 50s nostalgia. As the years went on, they started playing with their format, and it was played more goofy, more sitcom-y, but that's fine. Nothing wrong with any of that. They even got really goofy, because remember, this is the show that did spin off Mork and Mindy, so the Happy Days guy went to troubles in the 50s to dealing with, you know, Fonzie fighting an alien with Mork, or, you know, Fonzie having a guardian angel. They started doing these supernatural stories, which were not great, but they still had an endearing quality. Even when Fonzie famously jumped the shark, Fonzie, of course, you know, was the daredevil who jumped the, you know, the buses or the garbage cans and stuff and survived. But when he went to jump the shark, that became a catchphrase. Jumping the shark means when a show has done stuff that has done it. I think the show actually survived the jumping the shark. I liked that episode. I remember giggling a lot when I saw the two-parter of, you know, Arthur Fonzarelli on the water skis with his leather jacket getting ready to jump that shark. I think the show survived, but it was the point when Richie and Potsy were being written off to college. As much as Fonzie became the mainstay of the show, Richie was the heart of it, and the show always featured the trials and tribulations of Richie and Potsy and Ralph, and Fonzie just became the star because people really liked him, and he was cool, but he was also kind of goofy. But when Richie and I believe Richie and Potsy left the show, and I think Ralph stayed. I could be wrong. I think it might have actually been Richie and Ralph. It's been a while since I watched the run. I'm currently watching them, but I'm still in the early seasons rewatching them, because this is a show I watched when I was a kid, and I was religiously at the TV on Tuesdays to see it. And the problem with this is straightforward. As soon as they went off to college, the show became more about Fonzie. It was weird just seeing the Cuttinghams hanging out with Fonzie, and then you'd get just a couple random people. They started having Fonzie having a desk in the men's room, you know, because they always joked that at Arnold's, the restroom, the bathroom was his office, and when they redid it after a fire, they actually put a desk in there. Now, I'm glad Fonzie could get away with a desk. If I had a desk standing looking at urinals, I would be, like, asked to leave immediately, but it just got kookier and kookier, and we accepted a lot of stuff from Happy Days, but I think when Richie left, to college. Though they do get pluses for having a nice finale when Joni and Chachi got married and all those characters came back, including Richie, who had already begun his successful directing at that point. Keeping in that vein, a spin-off of Happy Days was Laverne and Shirley. This is one of my all-time favorite sitcoms. Yeah, even I watch it now, I can tell it's not as great as when I used to watch it, but I still have big laughs. Penny Marshall and Cindy Williams are just phenomenally funny women, and I can watch these people. But did you know that there was a time in this show that Laverne and Shirley weren't even on it? Yeah. You see, Cindy Williams and Laverne, they basically had enough shows for syndication, and Cindy Williams was able to leave her contract. Both Penny Marshall and Cindy Williams begged the producers to drop the show, that end it on a good note, but because Laverne and Shirley was still doing okay in the ratings, they kept it. So Cindy Williams was written off, and Laverne was featured. Now, the show still was called Laverne and Shirley. But what makes this worse is that when Penny Marshall's contract was up, she walked out just right in the middle of the season. And the season ended with episodes that were with Carmine and Squiggy because Lenny had already left too. And, Laverne's father. These characters are supporting characters. The final episode of Laverne and Shirley is a Carmine Central episode with no Laverne and Shirley to be found. This show definitely overstayed its welcome. Sticking with one more comedy show, that 70s show is a blast. I love hearing that people are rewatching it again. But this show really should have ended when Eric and I believe Kelso was starting to be written off. When Eric leaves, the show has always been a group show, so people like Fez and Kelso and all the other characters really brought it together. But the heart again is Eric, because Eric was like the Richie character, and whether you love the character or not, it was his stories that usually caused the trauma. So when Eric was written off, they even tried to cast people to kind of fill his spots, but it never quite worked, and the show always felt a little weird. It's cool trying to bring on a cousin or something, but I just think that 70s show definitely could have been trimmed a couple of seasons. The thing I think most about it is the fact that it started its run in the late 70s. Season 1 actually has a Star Wars-centric episode. So the fact that it started in 77 and the show ran several seasons even past the 70s, this show could have ended easily a couple seasons earlier. Now, this is my own personal taste, but these next three shows are shows that, when they came on, said they were only going to run for 5 years and then call it a wrap. But because the shows became so successful, they decided to hold on and make some more money off of it. And one of these shows is still on the air. The first one is The X-Files. Now, this show I absolutely adored, and I know people loved it. It was a national phenomenon, and David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson became superstars overnight because of it. Now, they always talked about it going only 5 years and then kind of having a revelation. But the show was successful. The only problem was the show ran longer and then David Duchovny decided to leave. Now, he eventually came back in a reboot and came and did a couple of movies. But I remember going to the theater to seeing one of the movies for one of the David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson reunions. And the first movie, I think they did 2, but don't quote me on that. It was just horrible. It was like a boring episode of the show. It didn't look like it needed to be on the big screen. I know they wanted to spin it off and try it, and I think that's how they tempted David Duchovny to stick around for a little longer. And I think it actually made money because I think they tried to release another one. But I think the show was all about how David Duchovny had these beliefs and Gillian Anderson was the one who didn't. So yes, they did try to find an element that when David Duchovny's character goes missing, that Gillian Anderson's character now has the belief and is trying to find her partner that eventually she, also loves and cares about. But I think the show went on too long, and even when they said they were rebooting it, I thought the show was already dead in the water. They did some amazing episodes, and I'll watch any of the early episodes at any time. But when it got too convoluted, I just think this show would have been nicer if they tied it up in the wrap that they originally wanted. Maybe going even 6 or 7, but make sure both your lead characters are sticking around. Smallville. I love Tom Welling. I think his portrayal of Clark Kent as young Superboy is great. The only problem with Smallville is, again, this was supposed to run 5 seasons, but what happened, the show was so popular that it went on to, I believe, ran 10 seasons. I could be wrong. I haven't done my homework on that. But I gave up about season 6 or 7 because I just didn't like some of the stories with Lana and Lex. But the problem I had with this was this show was supposed to run for 5 years, and that was it. Now, the producers always stuck by their guns and said that you will never see Tom Welling in the Superman suit unless it was the very last episode. So they decided to continue the story, but they never went back on their promise that you will never see Superman flying around in this series. But the problem with me is that Superman was doing all these super heroic things, but they started introducing like Aquaman and the Flash. They may not have been using those names, but they were. Green Arrow, lots of others. Cyborg was in there. They started bringing all these other characters that were already fighting crime, and there was still no Superman. And the fact that they kept going later and later in the show, and got to remember, Smallville started as, Tom Welling as a 15, 16-year-old boy. So by 10 years, he's no longer a kid anymore. That's one thing I liked about Teen Wolf, is that at least they wrapped it up in 6. So they did stretch it a little bit, but they went right to graduation and a couple of months after, and then they decided to call it quits. The fact that they kept prolonging it was a problem because Superman was not getting out in the world. And for me, I had to walk away because I just couldn't believe there were all these heroes, but the one we needed, Superman, wasn't around. And finally, Supernatural. Now, I know this show has still a rabid fan base, and I'm glad you're watching it and enjoying it. But believe it or not, this was supposed to wrap in 5 years. In fact, if you watch the first 5 seasons, they kind of wrap up the story nicely. But everybody who was in agreements, including the stars, Jared Padalecki and Jensen Ackles, said that, hey, if they want to, back up the truck with a whole bunch of money, I'm going to keep doing it for year and year. This show is now in its 12th, 13th year, and I had to give up on it because it kept moving away from supernatural stuff and went more into the angels and devils and stuff. Now, you may love that, and you may love the show, and I love the show. I think it was great, but I started seeing a lot of fatigue when they got into season 6 and 7, and I just personally felt that they just started doing crazy things, and I kind of missed the Monster of the Week foray that they were called about, where every week they deal with a different supernatural. Now the stories were intertwined and the characters were dying and going to hell and stuff like that. Nothing wrong with that, but for me, I was ready to check out. This show is consistently popular, so maybe I'm wrong on this, and please tell me if I am. And I'm glad you're still a fan of Supernatural, but for me, I think they should have stayed, because I think what happened is I think Jared Padalecki and Jensen Ackles are very talented, and I would have like to actually see them try other things. They both did a couple of movies, but they stayed in the horror genres, and although I liked both those movies, I just felt that they could have been doing other things, and I thought the Supernatural series just doesn't need that many seasons, but that's just me. As always, these are just my opinions, and you don't have to agree with them, but I will say this. If you enjoy these shows and even enjoyed them right till the end, I'm glad. Because they were all good shows at one time. I just felt that they overstayed their welcome a little much. Well, I'm going to take a short break, and then I'm going to talk about some interesting, exciting news that just came out. Some people are torn by it. I'm kind of excited by it, but I'll talk about that later. It's about a show I absolutely adore that was Canadian filmed called The Hilarious House of Frightenstein. I'm just excited to be talking some new stuff about it. And then we're going to go down memory lane with something that you may remember as a child too. That's coming up right after the break.
What's your pleasure, sir or madam, and all you kiddies too? Sandwiches, freshly made from quality ingredients, soft drinks, cool, tangy, and refreshing. A hot dog? There you are, tender, juicy, done to a turn with some fixins. Hamburgers, ma'am? Just the way you like 'em, meaty, moist, and broiled to perfection. Soft drinks, kiddies? Take your choice, cold, tingly with flavor, all your favorite soft drinks for your selection. Something to eat for everyone. Soft drinks to make your evening complete. Delicious, fresh, and satisfying to help your entertainment reach the peak of family fun.
Welcome back. Devlin here with you, and welcome to Devlin's Mondo Nostalgia radio show. Now, since I heard news about this, I have been so anxious to talk about this because it's one of my favorite cult classic shows, and I know there's a lot of people out there who also love this show. I'm talking about Hilarious House of Frightenstein, a show that was actually filmed right here in my hometown of Hamilton, Ontario, and it is just an amazing show that starred Billy Van, and a few other people, and Vincent Price doing the narrative bits. And it is just a show that it is definitely of its time. I've tried to show some younger people, and they're like, what in the hell is this? But, you know, I know it's a little dated. Even when I watch it, it's dated, it's campy, but I absolutely adore this show. Now, recently, the Staircase Cafe Theater had one of the only people left who's involved in it. His name is Mitch Markowitz. I hope I got that right. He came out to the Staircase, and they actually showed some vintage episodes of the show at the Staircase Theater. They didn't know what to expect, but they decided they would have a cereal buffet and opened up the doors to this, and they showed footage of the people streaming into the Staircase Theater. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it. I already had plans that day, but I wish I was there because it just seemed like this line kept going and going and going. It was just awesome, and you saw parents with their kids and grandparents with their grandkids, and it was, you can tell this show really left its mark. The show did air in the States as well. It had more of a classic thing there. A lot of people remember it playing at nights. I had here in Canada, it played in the mornings, and I remember waking up at 6 a.m. before school just to catch a glimpse of all my favorite characters from Hilarious House of Frankenstein, like the Count and Griselda, the gourmet witch, and, you know, Wolfman, and, you know, Igor, and just a wonderful thing. Now, I had a couple of years ago, I went to see Mitch, I always forget his name, Mitch Markowitz, and I got to see him tell some incredible stories. He's sadly one of the last few people remaining on the filming of that show because we've lost so many, like Billy Van and Vincent Price. Even people who used to produce it and stuff are long gone. And he is the sole owner of it, and he told some amazing stories. I won't go into them. I've actually got I did a Frightenstein review back when I was doing little cams of things I loved. So, you know, you can probably find that on YouTube or on the Facebook channel. But basically, to see so much love for this show. Now, for a long time, there's always been the questions of, are these shows even out? They released a few in DVD, and I've got most of the ones they've released. But that still only counts for over, I think I've got like about close to 30 episodes, but I know that there is over 130 episodes. There actually is 130 episodes in the series. But everybody wondered because there was always rumors that they were destroyed, or, you know, these urban legends that, you know, the last people that aired it in syndication were told to just burn it because it cost too much to store these old films. But the good news is these aren't destroyed. There is still some master tapes, and I'm so happy to hear about that. Now, they've had to alter them a little bit. Not much, but the big problem is the Wolfman segments. The problem with the Wolfman segments is that they were too long. Not too long as in thing, but what they'd do is they'd actually play a song. And back in the day before copyrights and stuff, they just played anything. So the Wolfman was introducing me to all these great 60s hits, like by the Supremes and the Rolling Stones and stuff. And they would just play anything. But the problem is when it aired on TV or when they tried to release stuff on DVD, they'd have to get the copyright. And some of these artists were like, no, you're not using Jumpin' Jack Flash and stuff like that. So what they've done for Canadian syndication is they've found, you know, more music of its time, but people who have okayed the music. So they've had to actually dub Wolfman's voice sometimes to say the actual song. So sometimes when you watch those segments, they don't sound as much as Billy Van as all the other segments because he played so many characters on that show. Anyhow, but the good news is all 130 episodes are intact. But here is the really great news. Apparently, Mitch Markowitz, who has owned the rights to this, has just sold them to a brand new formed company called Headspinner. Now, they said that they've been trying to get the rights to Hilarious House of Frightenstein for for a long time. But because of the fact that there were so many legal issues and stuff, they weren't sure exactly who owned it. Now it's been said, and it's officially been signed over by this new group. Now, normally that would get me worried, but the truth of the matter is, according to the stories, Mitch Markowitz has actually been working with them in order to work on new projects and stuff. And he eventually decided that this was the right thing. He's getting up there in years, and he knows that eventually he's not going to be around, and he wants this show to be preserved. And there's a couple on YouTube you can check out, and I strongly recommend that after this episode of You Don't Know Frightenstein, or if you remember it but don't remember it, go there to check it out because it's just a phenomenal show. But anyhow, he realized these were the people that he wanted to be behind this because they had the same ideas as he did. And not only did they buy it, but there's more news. They are actually working on a new version of this show. Now, I posted this on my Mondo Nostalgia page, and I had some mixed people because everybody said, without Billy Van, this show is nothing. And I don't know if I'm happy about this. Well, I was instantly happy because, yes, I agree with you. Billy Van was the star of this show. He plays multiple characters in the show, and people would keep signing out, and he would take on another character. And it's amazing to see. And how you see it on this show is incredible. Because how they used to do it was because there's so much elaborate makeup. If they did a Griselda segment, they would do a whole bunch of Griseldas on one day so he didn't have to get out of the makeup because the segments are short. But what makes the show zany is by the end of the day, they were just doing anything just because there was so much improv involved near the end that it was just do anything. We need the footage. Or next day they do Pet Vet or, Bawana Clyde Batty. Oh, geez, just saying these names excite me. So yes, I agree. But I don't think that should stop people to give a new chance. I've seen a lot of new things that I've really liked of old things, and it doesn't ruin the stuff from the past. I love the original Where Are You Scooby-Doos, but I love the new Be Cool Scooby-Doo. It has the essence of the show, but it also has a zaniness that appeals to more modern audiences. I also liked updated versions of the Mickey Mouse cartoons they do. Wabbit is pretty good for Bugs Bunny, and I'm even enjoying a little bit the Wacky Races update that they have done recently. So I don't see why they can't take it into a new generation using characters we love. They're also talking about an animated series. And of course, the producer and the writer from it, Mitch Markowitz, is going to have some say in all this, which makes me even doubly confident in this. And they're thinking of taking those great characters and making an animated series of them. And it excites me so much, the thought of this. But there's even more. The fact that they now own all 130 episodes, that means there's a chance we could see more coming out on DVD. And I would absolutely love that. I honestly would just die to see more of that. Because this show just means so much to me. And yes, I know some of it doesn't translate now, but for some of us, we kind of like that old style goofiness and stuff. But anyhow, there's a possibility. And they're also talking about merchandising. I'm slowly starting to see some merchandising coming out. I bought a beautiful print of Hilarious House of Frightenstein at one of the Hamilton Comic Cons when I saw Mitch Markowitz and the thing. And I get so many compliments from that. In fact, I've had people say, you better watch that because I might take that from you. And that's flattering to me because it's good. And I recently just got another print that I am so proud of too. And I haven't got it framed yet, but I love it, and you can see it in some of our Damien and Devlin shows in the background. And so these artists are making these wonderful interpretations, but they might bring out toys and shirts and stuff to keep the Frightenstein stuff around. Now, if you are a fan of Hilarious House of Frightenstein, there is some great sites out there. Facebook has a great group. I can't think of the name of it right now, but it is one that'll keep you up to date on news. Like this past Christmas, they released vinyl versions of music from Hilarious House of Frightenstein, including those amazing theme songs to just some background music that they played. And they'll keep you up to date with everything. And you'll always hear Frightenstein news around while I am. And you can also go on Mondo Nostalgia, because anytime we hear about this stuff, and now it looks like we might actually be hearing more about it, or at least I can only hope. This is a show that needs to see revitalization, but also to be remembered for what the quality was of that old show. The fact that it was filmed in Hamilton gives it an extra bit of nostalgia, just because this show is just so phenomenal. Anyhow, as I said, Hilarious House of Frightenstein was a show I used to watch in the mornings. And it was on weekday mornings, but occasionally it come on Saturday mornings too. And what I loved about it was sitting there with my cereal and just watching all my favorite shows, whether it's Frightenstein, whether it was, the Looney Tunes Hour, whether it was Super Friends, Scooby-Doo, whatever it was, H.R. Puffin stuff. I always loved my cereal, and I've said in the past that, I always liked the sugary cereal. My parents were always kind of good at not getting us the Shreddies or the Cheerios. We always got the Lucky Charms, the Captain Crunches, the Count Choculas, if you will, Tricks, And we knew they weren't healthy, but I don't know. If you ever saw the size of me when I was a little kid, you'd understand. But though, don't get me wrong, there were times I wanted the Shreddies and the Cheerios because they had better prizes in them. Yeah, I don't want to upset you kids. There was a time you got prizes in your cereal. So not only did you get sugary goodness, but you could get a decoder ring, or you could get a little action figure, or you could get so many different things. And they eventually stopped that because it promoted badness. But I don't know why, because the healthy cereals had that too. But I didn't want to just talk about cereals. I wanted to talk about a specific cereal, because at my age now, just turning 50, nostalgia kicks in a big way. And I recently was shopping, and I see these every week, but for some reason, maybe there was a song playing at the grocery store, and I saw these, and I felt, I'm going to talk about these sometime because I have great memories for them. Now, we used to always get the big boxes, the family size. But I remember back in the day, I used to go camping with a wonderful family, the MacLeods. We all lived together on Fife Street. And I remember we'd wake up in the morning, and sometimes we'd have bacon and eggs, where they would cook it on this little stove that they had. But I also remember some days we just had cereal. And when we had that cereal, it was those little boxes. You can still get them. They're not as popular as they once were, but basically I think you get either 6 or 8 boxes in them. And they would get all different kinds. You'd get like Rice Krispies, Frosted Flakes, Raisin Bran, Fruit Loops. I think these are the ones you can find. They used to have a healthy one too. But basically, I remember they would always say, "Who wants cereal?" And when we did, they would throw all these little boxes. And these boxes make me so nostalgic thinking about how amazing they were. Now, I've actually bought them a few times. For camping, they were perfect because you always had limited shelves. Like whether you were going just with a tent or whether you were going in like a camper, there was always limited space. So you couldn't really have like 3 different kinds of boxes of the big kind because it took up too much space and you needed that for other provisions. So they would put these little boxes, and I remember it was great. Now, if you remember the little boxes, what was even greater about them is you could actually cut the box, and the plastic that had held the cereal in, you could actually pour the milk in, and if you did it right and didn't cut any holes in both sides, you could actually use it as a little bowl. And they still have that in the cereal because you can still buy these packages. And I remember how heartwarming it was to think that we don't even have to waste a bowl here. We could just cut it open and be gentle that we don't cut through to the bottom or you're going to make a mess, or cut through your plastic lining in the bottom because that would make a mess. And then you would pour the milk in and you would have these wonderful little cereals. And as I said, sometimes I get them still because I think my big problem was when I get cereal, I want a gigantic bowl. So then, I put on my Frosted Flakes, and then I feel like, wow, I ate a lot of cereal. So I sometimes go through phases where I just want a little bit of cereal, and to me, this seems like the right size portion. If you don't want too many corn pops, go for the small box. And I remember everybody fighting for the flavors because they always put a couple of ones that like the Raisin Bran, which I have no problem with Raisin Bran, but that was considered the healthy one at the time. When you're looking at Fruit Loops and Raisin Bran, as a kid, Fruit Loops for me all the time. Rice Krispies too. I like the way they talk, but I also like how I shut them up by pouring so much sugar on top of them because Rice Krispies need a little something. Other people put fruit. I was a fat kid. I put sugar. So anyhow, I was in the store, I don't know, something was playing, maybe something by England Dan and John Ford Coley, and I saw these little packets of cereal, and I said, I want to do a shout out to these little packages of cereal, because they've been around forever. And I love that here in 2018, I can still, if I'm going up to the cottage, if I'm going camping, or if I just want a snack, because these are also good for taking with you to work. When you can't have a bowl of cereal, you could just chow down on some Fruit Loops or, Frosted Flakes as a snack. Or, buy a little thing of milk and you can still use the cutting lines and make that bowl. It warms my heart. And I just love that something like this has survived because we see so many things. I always ask people, do you remember chips? The big family bags when you'd open them and there'd be 2 bags inside, 2 white bags, and you'd pull them out and you could have, okay, I feel like watching One Day at a Time and I'm going to have some salt and vinegar chips. So you'd open the big bag, you'd take one out and the other one you'd save for, maybe watching soap later on in the week. So you would eat your chips and you'd feel full and stuff, but you knew you had another bag in there for later on in the week. I always ask people of this because this is of a certain time, and some people remember it, other people don't, but there was a time when you bought one of those big bags of chips, it actually came with 2 separate bags inside. I kind of wish they did that because, I eat sometimes for stress. And so when I'm grabbing for a big bag of chips, I try to put it in a bowl. But when I'm starting to eat it right from the bag, there's a chance that bag might not be empty. I'm getting better in my later years because usually I get bloated way before a bag's finished. But it would have been so much handier to do this. But I love that stuff like that has all disappeared. Even sizes of chips have disappeared. Yeah, you either get really small ones, you go right up to the big bags now. There's that middle size that seems to have disappeared. That was the size I used to go with my coins to the variety store when I'd get a little bit of money and I'd buy a bag of chips when I was feeling like chips. But that size seems to have gone now. And they either have really small bags or bigger bags. And I hate that they do that. But I love that in 2018, I can still go to grocery stores and there's those 4 little 8-box things. I think it's 8. I think some have 6. And you can have your Raisin Bran, your Corn Pops, your Fruit Loops, your Rice Krispies, your Frosted Flakes, and you can have a variety of them. The variety pack, that's what they were called. Anyhow, I just felt the need to talk about that because it's a nice memory, and I hope I made you smile remembering those times. Or maybe you still eat those little bags. I'm sure parents still buy them because they're great for kids, Here, you want to have some Fruit Loops? So I hope I've stirred some memories, because that's what I like to do here on Mondo Nostalgia. As much as we talk about new stuff, I like to take you back to the old school now and again. And we'll be doing a lot more of that in this new format. And I'm in a good mood right now. I actually feel like cereal. I don't have any of the little packs, so it's a big bowl for me. Anyhow, thanks for tuning in this week, and I will see you next week for more Mondo Nostalgia Radio Show. See you then.